Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. And tonight I'm once again going to be speaking about the path of the AA, the initiatory system of the AA, as a follow-on from my previous video, but I want to focus in on the most significant steps in the path of initiation according to the AA, and connecting that to the Tree of Life diagram which I've got up here. This is the three most important stages on the path of the initiation up the tree. The knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, the crossing of the abyss, and one which often gets overlooked but is equally important, the beginning of the initiatory journey itself. And at each of these points, as I'll demonstrate, you pass into a different section of the tree which is completely different to the rest. So if you haven't seen my previous video on the path of initiation according to the grades of the AA, I'd highly recommend you watch that. You'd also benefit from watching my video on the Tree of Life and perhaps on the Kabbalah. I'll link those in the description below. So I want to begin this video actually by talking about black holes. And I was fascinated with black holes when I was younger, and I learnt all about them, all that I could about them. And one of the things that I learnt about black holes is that there's several different kind of layers to the black hole. The singularity in the middle, where everything returns to the infinite. And then there's the kind of ring of gas and dust around the black hole, which is being distorted by gravity. And then as you're moving through space before it's distorted by the black hole, or when it's only just starting to get distorted, you start to see space around you getting distorted, but it's still the space you're familiar with. But as you get closer and closer to the black hole, you get closer and closer to what's called the event horizon. And as you pass the event horizon, you completely lose contact with the dimensions of space and time as they are familiar to you, and you're in a completely different concept of space and time which you cannot possibly imagine, and no light can enter for you to possibly perceive it until you have crossed the event horizon. And then once you cross the event horizon, there's an inner event horizon, and then within that is the singularity, which you cannot see. And you eventually, when you hit the singularity, it's like being reabsorbed into a point of infinite space and time. But you can't perceive it at all until you have crossed the event horizons within the black hole. And this anatomy of the black hole and what happens as we journey within the black hole is actually a very apt metaphor for the cosmos, for the different realms of existence as they are depicted on the Tree of Life, with the singularity representing Keter, the highest point of divinity, where everything collapses back into the infinite, and Malkut being the dimensional reality that we're familiar with, of space and time functioning as we normally would expect it to. But then as you approach the singularity of Keter, there are a number of event horizons that you need to cross on the tree. And as you do that, each time you cross one of these event horizons, it represents a fundamental shift in your consciousness, so that you cannot possibly imagine what it is like to be at each level of the tree beyond one of these event horizons until you've experienced it. So there's different levels of initiation on the Tree of Life in the AA system and the Golden Dawn system, which I've spoken about in my previous video. But if you're at a lower level of initiations, you can still kind of understand the other tasks of the higher grades. Say you're in the grade of Zealotor, here in Yesod. You might be doing your asana and pranayama practices, and that's your focus. You've not yet reached the stage where you're doing the study of Kabbalah or say, the study of divination, which is somewhere around here. It's here, actually, the path of Koth. But if you're a Zelator and you're not, and you're focusing on your asana and your pranayama, you can still imagine what it must be like to learn a system of divination. So let's say you want to learn how to use tarot cards. You can imagine what the cards look like, what it's like to thumb through them as you're shuffling them and selecting them. And you can imagine what it's like to use your intuition. There's probably times where you've followed your gut before, and so you have a rough idea of the intuition that you need to follow in selecting the cards, and maybe you even have some idea of the symbolism behind those cards. Even though you haven't experienced it yet, you can grasp it intellectually. You can comprehend it to an extent. But if you go further up here to the grade of Adeptus Minor in Tifereth, and you try and understand what knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel is like, which is the task of this grade, to attain that knowledge and conversation, there is nothing in your comprehension, nothing that is familiar that you have learnt or experienced that you could possibly compare that to. And so in order to get from this part of the tree to this part, you need to cross an event horizon. And they're referred to in the Kabbalah as the veils. So actually in the Kabbalistic tree of life, there are two veils here. There is one veil here. This is called the veil of Paraket. And then above that, there is a second veil. This is the most well-known of the two. This is the veil of the abyss. And so, again, when you pass over from these grades to here, you can't possibly understand what is above the abyss until you have crossed it. Each time you cross one of these veils, it represents one of the two major milestones on the path of initiation. The knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, and the crossing of the abyss. And I would add a third important stage in the path of initiation down here. When you first enter the path, you go from ordinary, mundane life to understanding that there is a magical or spiritual dimension to reality. That in itself is a fundamental shift in perception which most people can't comprehend. And this is what's referred to as the vision of the angel in the Golden Dawn tradition, not to be confused with knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, which comes later. But that much more advanced spiritual experience is kind of prefigured by the vision of the angel as you first enter the path from Malkuth. It's like in the first Matrix film, where Neo, before he wakes up from the Matrix, he goes about living in this simulation, this fake reality, thinking that it's real, thinking that that's all there is to life. And then suddenly he's woken up in his sarcophagus, in his pod, and he is reborn into this new reality where he understands there is another dimension to life. And then, having gone through this death-like experience and this rebirth type of experience, he then eventually returns to the Matrix. And everything is as it was before, but he has this knowledge, this awareness of this extra dimension to life, and it changes the way that he behaves as he navigates that reality, for lack of a better word. And so when we first leave our familiar world of Malkuth to really start to explore the initiations, to explore the spiritual realms, that's really what it's like. So that's a veil in its own right, in my opinion. And what you'll notice here is that in between each of these, say, event horizons, there is one of 3 triads on the tree. These are called the 3 triplicities. And so you've got the principle of 3 here. 3 and the repetition of the 3 for 3 triads. And so at each level, with the exception of Malkut representing the earth, you've got a triad of divinity manifesting itself at that level of reality. And so you see how neatly the Kabbalistic tree of life kind of encapsulates all these different sacred patterns that appear in the universe and in consciousness. So once you've passed over into this first triplicity, this first triad, and you've mastered all of the tasks, you've done all the initiations at this level, it's time to cross the first of the 2 veils, the veil of Paraket. And this is where you attain the experience called knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel. And as I said before, there is a radical way that your perception needs to change from how it was before in order to comprehend this experience. You've got some idea of the magical and the mystical, but you still cannot imagine knowledge and conversation. So what is the difference with knowledge and conversation? Well, with knowledge and conversation, you've really had a direct experience of identification with the divine. Up until now, you would have learnt that we have a divine spark within us, that we have the sacred Atman, which is at the core of our being. And you would kind of understand that at our deepest level, we are all the divine. We are all God expressing itself in a certain way. But at the root of consciousness, there is a singular experience of pure being, which is Atman, which is what everybody is, and is what is at the core of our being as well, and is at the core of the spiritual part of our nature. And you can say all of those words, but you can't really understand it unless you've experienced it. Much like talking about the sensation of being in love, you can talk about it all day long, but until you've experienced it, you don't really know what it's like. And so when you've attained knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, you've had that experience. You've united with the angel, and you've united with Atman, therefore, and you have experienced reality from the perspective of that inner divinity, that point of divinity. And so that represents crossing a veil. And in the next triplicity here, you're kind of trying to strengthen that experience as much as you can, trying to recalibrate the rest of your life and kind of transform the rest of your life to kind of accommodate that experience, because much of what is in your life already will be resistant to how it is for divinity to operate in the world. So there's a process of, working through karma and transforming yourself that has to happen at this level. Just trying to renovate and transform our being as much as possible to be more in alignment with the divine, to make it easier for the angel, for the Atman to express itself through us as its vehicle. But as much as we might become more virtuous, as much as we might eliminate ego in the form of negative habits or beliefs, we still fundamentally have a view of ourselves as an individual and as a singular personality. Although we've had an experience of Atman, although we've had an experience of our inner divinity, it's still divinity that is kind of individualized. So it's still not a complete union. Even if in the moment of knowledge and conversation we have a transcendent kind of experience, once we come back down to this level of reality, we immediately individualize it. It immediately becomes filtered through our personality, our sense of self, which has not yet been destroyed and has not yet been transformed. And we still identify as a personality, as an individual, even if it's as a divine individual. But what happens when we cross this next veil, the veil of the abyss, is another fundamental shift in consciousness. This is where we completely reject any notion of a phenomenal world, of a world where there are divisions between things, and we become aware that we are everything and everything is us, and our personality, our individuality is nothing but an illusion. We have an even more pure experience of union with divinity, where even the most basic distinctions disappear. Subject and object, being and non-being, existence and non-existence, consciousness and unconsciousness. Even those most fundamental dualities that we take for granted vanish, and we experience something beyond all of them. This is what it truly means to cross the abyss. And because this is such a unusual way for us to think about our reality, in the curriculum of the AA, there is a task in preparation for crossing the abyss, which is laid out in Liber os abysmi veldat, which is basically the intellectual crossing of the abyss. And what this involves is reading philosophical texts like Kant's Prolegomena, which seek to disprove the idea that there is anything truly real that we can comprehend, and that everything we perceive is nothing but a perception, and that beyond the world of our perception, as we receive it through the five senses and through the sensations of pleasure and pain, outside of that we can know nothing. We don't truly know what the real world is like. We only know how our senses interpret the world. And so it's all about destroying any notion that we can possibly know what's real. Everything that we perceive is just part of a duality which ultimately reconciles with itself to become nothing. And so we are left with nothing objectively true save for the fact that nothing that we think exists really exists, and we cannot possibly know what reality truly is. All that we know is illusion, behind which there is nothing. And even realizing this at an intellectual level can bring on a terrible existential dread, which is kind of like a precursor to the experience of crossing the abyss at an even deeper level of one's being. And so what happens when we change our perception in this way is our notion of ourself as distinct from the universe, another duality, another illusion based on nothing but perception, is shattered. And we experience something which is beyond that, beyond the personality. And of course, by implication, what is happening as well when you cross the abyss is that the ego is being destroyed, or at least as energy cannot be destroyed but changed as form, transforming the ego into a more transcendent form of the personality. If you look at what each of the three triplicities mean, we can kind of see a bit of a pattern here as well. The highest represents pure divinity. The lowest represents our personality, developing spiritually but still intact. So this is the human world and this is the divine world. In a sense, you could think of it that way. Each of the grades in these sephira are attributed to one of the four elements. The four elements are very much divisions of the physical world. But when you get to the middle here, the triplicities here, particularly Tifereth in the center here, it's really about the union of the human and the divine. That's what the experience of knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel is really all about. And so what does it mean then to progress from this level up to this level and then up to this level? Well, really, you start with a personality, you refine yourself spiritually until you have an experience where divinity is able to descend down into you and unite with you. But it's an experience of simultaneously having that divine nature and still having that human nature. But what happens as you progress through the grades in this triplicity is that piece by piece, the more human part of you starts to be transformed and divinized and spiritualized, but you still have the sensation of the personality and don't understand anything outside of an individualized perspective. Even our experience of being divine is individualized. You're talking about a divine spark or a divine point of awareness as though that's something separate from the all, from the infinite. That illusion is shattered when you cross the abyss. And with the final shattering of the remaining illusions that we have about our separation from the all, and thus our separation from the divine, we can become completely divinized. We can become completely pure vehicles for the divine to work through us. And that is the theme of the grades in this final triad, the supernal triad. And so that is how you can roughly break the initiations of the AA into different levels separated by these event horizons or veils. Except for this is not so much a veil, but it does represent a radical shift in perspective. And at each one of these points is one of the most crucial points in the career of the initiate in terms of their spiritual development. If you're an initiate of the AA, or you're looking to become one, or you're just interested in Western esotericism, I hope that this, together with my previous video on the path of initiation, was useful to you. I hope it was useful in understanding knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, the crossing of the abyss, how it all fits together on the tree, and the pattern that appears on the tree, and why those particular points in the path are so important. If you have your own views on this, please leave your comments down below. Please also subscribe to my channel if you'd like to support what I'm doing here. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to my Odyssey also. But thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.